Let's be honest. In today's world, when someone pulls away, we immediately assume they're playing games. But what if the truth isn't about manipulation? What if it's about fear? What if he's not pulling away to confuse you, but to protect himself? Fear, not indifference. That's what most people don't understand. When a man pulls back, when he grows quiet, when his energy shifts from warmth to distance, the world immediately labels him as uninterested or manipulative. We say, he's playing games. We tell ourselves stories to protect our pride, because believing he doesn't care is easier than admitting he's scared. Yet the truth is often more complex, more human, and far more tender than most are willing to see. There are men who have loved deeply before, who gave everything they had to someone who didn't know how to hold it. They were the ones who sent good morning texts, who made plans, who showed up, who believed that love would be enough. They were the ones who stayed when it was hard, who tried to fix things when they were falling apart, and who carried the guilt when it didn't work out. And when the relationship ended, it wasn't just the breakup that hurt them. It was the belief that all their effort, all their honesty, all their vulnerability still wasn't enough. That kind of pain changes a man. It doesn't turn him cold overnight, but it plants a seed of fear. It whispers that love is unpredictable, that showing too much care makes you weak, that the one who loves harder loses control. So the next time he meets someone, even if she's kind, even if she's everything he's ever wanted, that whisper returns. Don't go too fast. Don't open up too much. Don't let her see how much she means to you. And that's where confusion begins. Because from the outside, it looks like he's detached, inconsistent, or emotionally unavailable. But inside, he's fighting a battle between desire and defense. He wants to call, but he doesn't. He wants to text, but he deletes it. He wants to be open, but he fears the moment when vulnerability will once again be used against him. It's not a lack of interest, it's a deep, rooted caution born from experience. When a man fears getting hurt again, he doesn't stop feeling, he starts controlling. He analyzes every move, second, guesses every feeling, and hesitates at every sign of closeness. If she's too affectionate, he worries she'll lose interest once he reciprocates. If she's distant, he assumes it's already happening. He starts preparing for disappointment before it even arrives. It's not because he wants to sabotage love. It's because he's trying to survive it. And yet, the irony of fear is that it creates the very outcome he dreads. In protecting himself from pain, he prevents connection. In avoiding rejection, he withholds the very authenticity that would make love real. He wears armor that keeps him safe, but also keeps him lonely. Because love cannot reach the heart that's guarded by walls of what if? The truth is, fear doesn't make someone heartless, it makes them cautious. You can see it in the small things. The pause before replying, the subtle withdrawal after a deep conversation, the way he changes the subject when emotions get too real. That hesitation is not playing, it's self-protection disguised as detachment. And most women misread it. They think, if he cared, he wouldn't pull away. But the reality is, sometimes he pulls away because he cares too much. When a man is indifferent, he doesn't overthink. He doesn't analyze every word she said. He doesn't worry if he's saying the right thing. Indifference is easy. It doesn't consume you. Fear does. Fear keeps you awake, wondering if you'll mess up something good again. Fear makes you distance yourself before anyone else can. Fear makes you wear calmness like armor, hoping no one sees the panic underneath. And yet, here's what we forget. Fear doesn't come from weakness, it comes from depth. The more deeply someone can feel, the more deeply they can be hurt. The man who's scared isn't broken. He's still processing the weight of what love once cost him. He's not playing games to confuse anyone. He's trying to understand if he can trust himself to love again. Because for him, The fear isn't just about being hurt by someone new. It's about not being able to recover like he did the last time. So when he hesitates, when he takes longer to open up, when he seems to need space right after intimacy, that's not inconsistency. That's someone testing the safety of the connection. He's not trying to manipulate you. He's trying to make sure he won't drown again. And if you look closely, you'll see moments where the guard slips, where his eyes soften, where his words reveal truth, where he lets himself be seen. Those are not accidents. Those are cracks in the wall he's built. And those cracks are the beginning of courage. But courage is not instant. Healing isn't linear. You can't rush a man into emotional safety any more than you can demand a flower to bloom in winter. When someone has been hurt, they must relearn that closeness doesn't always equal pain. They must experience love without fear before they can trust it again. And that takes time, consistency, and proof. What he needs isn't pressure, it's presence. He doesn't need someone to demand vulnerability on command. He needs someone to make it safe to feel again, to love again. Because love that's real doesn't need to be chased. It needs to be trusted. When fear drives love, relationships turn into battlefields of assumptions. She thinks he's uninterested. He thinks she'll leave if she sees his fear. Both start pulling away to protect themselves. And neither realizes they're on the same team. The tragedy is not that people fall out of love. It's that they stop believing love can be safe. The second truth: emotional scars shape behavior. This isn't just about fear. It's about how pain rewires the way someone experiences connection. Emotional wounds are invisible, but they leave permanent imprints on how we love, how we trust, and how we respond. When someone gets hurt deeply, it's not just their heart that breaks. It's their belief system. They begin to associate love with loss, affection with vulnerability, honesty with danger. Their nervous system remembers. Their mind begins to predict rejection even before it happens. So when someone shows interest, instead of feeling excitement, they feel anxiety. Instead of leaning in, they lean away. That's why so many relationships fail, not because love isn't present, but because emotional safety isn't. People don't just need affection. They need assurance that they can be themselves without fear of being punished for it. They need to know they can be honest without being dismissed. They need to know their heart won't be used against them. For a man who's been hurt before, love becomes both the thing he wants most and fears most. He may crave closeness, but struggle with control. He may desire connection, but sabotage it when it gets real. It's not because he's cruel. It's because he's carrying emotional memories of what happened last time he let someone in. Think about it. When you touch a flame once and get burned, you don't stop believing in warmth. You just hesitate before reaching again. You hover your hand above the fire, testing the distance, remembering the pain. Love works the same way. A man who's been burned doesn't stop wanting love. He just fears the intensity of it. He worries that if he gives too much, it will all slip away again. That fear shows up in subtle ways. He might downplay his feelings, avoid deep conversations, or act more detached than he really is. It's not deception, it's protection. He's managing emotions by staying one step behind them. Because if he doesn't feel too much, maybe he won't lose too much. But emotional scars don't just fade with time, they heal through experience. A new connection can either reinforce the wound or rewrite it. That's why emotional maturity matters. When a woman misunderstands his hesitation as indifference, she withdraws too, and the cycle repeats. But when she recognizes that his behavior isn't rejection, but resistance born from fear, she can respond differently. Not with judgment, but with understanding. That doesn't mean excusing poor treatment. It means learning to see emotional patterns for what they are: defense mechanisms, not character flaws. Every person expresses pain differently. Some go quiet, some joke, some build distance. But beneath all of that, there's a longing to feel safe again, to be met, not measured. Healing requires both sides to step into awareness. For the man, it means admitting his fear instead of hiding behind pride. For the woman, it means seeing his hesitation not as proof he doesn't care, but as evidence that he once did, deeply. Love after pain requires reprogramming. It's not about forgetting what happened. It's about teaching the heart that not every story ends the same way. And that's hard, because the mind clings to the familiar. It says, remember how it felt last time, don't fall again. Don't trust again. And yet, real love can only be experienced when you let go of that inner voice, when you stop comparing new hearts to old heartbreaks. A man who has been through heartbreak often hides behind logic. He tells himself stories to justify distance. He says, I'm just not ready, or I need to focus on myself. Sometimes that's true, but often those are rational covers for emotional fear, because the truth is he may want love, but not the risk that comes with it. So he stays in the safe zone, half in, half out, close enough to feel connection, distant enough to feel in control. But that control is an illusion, because you can't selectively numb fear without numbing love too. You can't guard your heart and expect to feel alive. And that's where most men get stuck. Trapped between wanting intimacy and fearing it. Between craving closeness and craving safety. The only way through is courage. Not the kind that pretends not to care, but the kind that dares to be honest about fear. It takes real strength to say, I've been hurt before, and it scares me to open up again. That honesty doesn't make someone weak. It makes them authentic. Because love built on truth will always outlast love built on pretense. When emotional scars dictate behavior, healing starts with awareness. It's realizing that not every silence means rejection. Not every pause means disinterest. Sometimes, it means someone is trying not to repeat a past they still feel. It's realizing that the distance you feel isn't about you. It's about their unfinished story with pain. You can't rush that process. You can't force healing by demanding it. What you can do is embody the kind of presence that doesn't trigger fear. One that's calm, patient, and consistent. That's what emotional safety feels like. It's not words, it's energy. It's the difference between saying, you can trust me, and showing it over time. When a man feels safe, his defenses start to melt. His communication changes. His tone softens. He stops overthinking every move and starts being real again. That's the power of understanding over accusation. That's how walls built from fear begin to fall. Emotional scars don't disappear. They evolve. They turn into wisdom if we face them, or walls if we don't. A man who faces his pain learns to love more consciously. A man who avoids it learns to love conditionally. The choice determines the future of every connection he touches. Because love, when it's healthy, doesn't erase fear. It helps you live through it. It reminds you that getting hurt again is possible, but being open is worth it. It teaches you that vulnerability isn't the opposite of strength. It's the highest form of it. When someone fears being hurt again, it's not that they've lost faith in love. It's that they've lost faith in themselves to survive love's losses. The journey back to trust begins the moment they realize they're stronger now than when they were first broken. And that's where love stops being a game and starts being growth. Because real love doesn't demand perfection. It invites healing. And those who dare to love again after pain aren't foolish. They're the bravest ones among us. Because they've seen how fragile hearts can be, and they choose to keep them open anyway. The hidden language of fear often sounds like silence. It doesn't always speak through words, but through hesitation, through pauses, through the moments that leave you wondering what changed. You notice how he smiles a little less, how he takes longer to reply, how he suddenly seems distracted when just a few days ago he was attentive and present. You start to think he's losing interest. that he's playing with your emotions, that he's stringing you along. But sometimes, what you're witnessing isn't the loss of affection. It's the rise of fear. When someone begins to care deeply, fear can creep in like a shadow. It whispers doubts into the spaces where love is beginning to grow. What if she doesn't feel the same? What if I give everything again, and it ends just like last time? What if I'm not enough? These questions don't come from arrogance or confusion. They come from memory. Memory of what it felt like to be all in, only to find yourself alone. Memory of trusting too soon, only to watch that trust crumble. Memory of giving your best, only to be told it wasn't what they wanted. So when a man pulls back, it's often not because he's trying to play with your heart. It's because his own heart remembers how it felt to be shattered. Fear has a language, and it speaks in actions. It shows up as inconsistency, as emotional distance, as avoidance of deeper conversations. It looks like him being fine one day and detached the next. It feels like being pushed away right after moments of closeness. What's really happening is a tug of war between desire and defense. He wants to love freely, but his instincts are whispering that love is a battlefield. He wants to trust what he feels, but his mind is replaying the moments when trust became pain. Understanding that hidden language changes everything. It doesn't excuse it, but it reveals it. Because when you start to see the fear beneath the behavior, you realize that not every mixed signal is manipulation. Sometimes it's self-preservation. And that awareness shifts how you respond. Instead of reacting with frustration, you begin responding with perspective. Instead of thinking, he doesn't care, you begin asking, what pain is he trying not to feel again? Fear often hides behind pride. A man who's scared won't always admit it directly. He'll say, I'm just busy, or I'm not ready for anything serious right now. Those statements sound confident, but they're often masks, because saying, I'm scared, feels too vulnerable, too exposed. Society teaches men that fear makes them weak, that showing uncertainty makes them less masculine, less desirable. So they package fear into logic. They rationalize their emotions instead of revealing them. But beneath those explanations, there's usually a man who's terrified of losing control of his heart again. Fear also shows up in testing. He'll push subtly to see if you'll stay, if your words align with your actions. He'll say something he doesn't mean, just to see how you react. He'll distance himself to check if you'll chase or disappear. It's not that he's intentionally playing games. It's that he's trying to prove a theory his fear created, that everyone eventually leaves. So when you pull away after he does, he silently confirms his belief. See, I was right. Love always fades. This is why patience becomes powerful. Not passive patience that tolerates mistreatment, but the kind that allows space for someone to feel safe enough to show up. The kind that says, I won't chase you, but I also won't punish you for being scared. Because fear doesn't vanish with pressure. It dissolves with understanding. When someone feels seen without judgment, when they realize they can have space without losing connection, fear starts to loosen its grip. There's a difference between being patient and being blind. Patience sees the potential beneath the fear. Blindness ignores the pattern that never changes. The question is not whether you should wait. It's whether what you're waiting for is healing or hiding. Healing looks like effort, even if it's slow. Hiding looks like excuses, even if they sound reasonable. A man whose healing will communicate, even if it's clumsy. He'll show up in small ways. He'll admit when he's unsure, but he'll also try. His fear won't stop him from showing you that he values you. And this is where love becomes a mirror. Fear reveals how a person views themselves. A man who feels unworthy of love will subconsciously sabotage it. He'll pull away before you can reject him. He'll act indifferent so it hurts less if you walk away. What he's really saying through that distance is, I don't trust myself to be enough. And when you understand that, you stop taking everything so personally. You stop thinking you're the cause of his hesitation. You begin to see that he's not fighting you. He's fighting himself. That's why creating emotional safety matters. Not just for him, but for you too. Emotional safety means allowing space for truth without punishment. It's about being honest without fear of judgment. It's about knowing you can express how you feel without it being turned against you. When both people feel emotionally safe, fear loses its power to control the relationship. But when safety is missing, fear takes over through silence, withdrawal, defensiveness, or control. The hidden language of fear is not easy to translate because it doesn't always sound like fear. It sounds like confidence. It sounds like independence. It sounds like someone saying they're fine when they're breaking inside. But when you listen closely, not just to what they say, but to what they avoid, you begin to hear the truth. You begin to see that fear often disguises itself as emotional maturity, when it's really just emotional avoidance. Real strength isn't in pretending not to feel. It's in allowing yourself to feel and still choosing connection. When someone faces their fear instead of feeding it, their communication changes. They stop running at the first sign of closeness. They stop testing, stop overthinking, stop needing control. They begin to understand that vulnerability doesn't mean weakness. It means presence. And love only grows in presence. That's where patience and understanding come in, not as excuses, but as bridges. Every person who's been hurt has a version of love they're scared to return to. They remember the arguments that left scars, the rejection that made them question their worth, the betrayal that shattered their belief in loyalty. When they start something new, those memories don't just disappear, they echo. And those echoes can make them cautious, even distant. This is why understanding becomes the foundation of real connection. When you understand that his silence might be fear and not disinterest, you respond differently. You communicate differently. You don't chase, but you also don't assume the worst. You show calmness where he expects chaos. You show consistency where he expects disappointment. You show stability where he expects judgment. And slowly his nervous system begins to relax. Love that heals doesn't rush. It builds trust one small moment at a time. When someone is used to love that punished honesty, your ability to listen without attacking becomes medicine. When someone is used to being abandoned the moment they show imperfection, your willingness to stay becomes proof that love can be safe again. And that's where transformation begins. Not in words, but in presence. But patience doesn't mean tolerance of pain that never changes. Understanding doesn't mean sacrificing your own peace for someone else's fear. You can understand someone's pain without allowing it to control your worth. Because love is never about losing yourself to prove you care. It's about standing in your truth while inviting someone else to do the same. When fear runs a relationship, it creates patterns of push and pull. He gets close, then backs away. You get confused, then try harder. The harder you try, the more he feels pressured, and the more he withdraws. That's the loop fear thrives in, a cycle where both people react to each other's insecurities instead of understanding them. The only way to break that cycle is through emotional awareness. Awareness that both people have triggers. Awareness that fear doesn't make someone bad. It makes them human. Real love is not found in the absence of fear, but in the decision to love through it. Patience becomes an act of faith in that process. It says, I see your fear, but I believe in your strength to overcome it. That kind of presence changes people, because when someone feels seen, their defenses soften. They start to believe they can trust again, and trust is what every relationship needs to survive fear. Not blind trust that ignores behavior, but grounded trust built through consistency. You don't need to fix someone's fear. You need to give them reasons to stop feeding it. You do that through honesty, through boundaries, through stability. fear shrinks in the presence of truth. It grows in the shadow of uncertainty. Love doesn't heal fear through intensity. It heals it through calm. The more peaceful the connection, the easier it becomes to breathe in it. When someone feels they don't need to perform to be accepted, they naturally begin to open up. That's how patience works. It doesn't beg, it doesn't chase, it simply holds space. And holding space doesn't mean waiting forever. It means being secure enough to let time reveal the truth. There comes a point where you learn to distinguish between fear that can be healed and fear that controls. When someone uses fear as a reason not to try, not to communicate, not to grow, they're not protecting themselves. They're avoiding life. But when someone admits their fear yet still shows effort, still takes small steps toward connection, that's where love can thrive. Because those steps mean more than grand gestures. They mean courage. Every person has fears in love. The question is not whether they exist, but whether they lead or follow. The hidden language of fear becomes a lesson in empathy. It teaches you to see beyond the surface, to understand that what looks like coldness may actually be care restrained by caution. It reminds you that not everyone loves loudly. Some love quietly, carefully, while fighting their own mind every step of the way. And yet, love cannot stay alive if fear keeps writing the story. At some point, fear must be met with faith. Faith that not everyone will break you. Faith that this time could be different. Faith that healing doesn't erase the past. It redefines it. And when that happens, patience transforms from waiting into wisdom. You stop waiting for perfection and start valuing progress. You stop needing reassurance and start recognizing effort. You stop expecting constant intensity and start appreciating calmness. That's the role of patience and understanding. They become the soil where trust grows. They create an environment where fear no longer feels like a threat. When both people stop reacting to fear and start responding to truth, love becomes simpler, softer, and more real. Because love that lasts isn't about avoiding fear. It's about facing it together, hand in hand, with enough compassion to remind each other that the past doesn't have to define the present. And when that happens, when patience meets effort, when fear meets understanding, love stops feeling like a game and starts feeling like peace. It becomes less about guessing what the other person feels and more about feeling safe enough to ask. It becomes less about control and more about connection. Because when fear no longer drives love, love finally has room to breathe. There's a moment in every connection where you have to pause and ask yourself, what am I actually holding on to? Is it love that's growing, or is it potential that's keeping you stuck? Because there's a fine line between waiting for someone to heal and waiting for someone who has no intention of doing the work. And when you've been emotionally invested in someone who's scared, it can feel confusing to tell the difference. You see glimpses of depth, flashes of sincerity, moments where his guard drops just enough to remind you that something real exists beneath the fear. But then he pulls away again. He tells you he needs time. He says he's not ready. And suddenly, you're caught between compassion and self-respect. This is where love becomes one of the greatest tests of discernment, knowing when to wait and when to walk away. Waiting, when it's rooted in wisdom, means you see effort, you see progress, no matter how small. You see someone trying to face their fears, someone who might stumble but doesn't stop moving forward. Walking away, on the other hand, means recognizing when someone's fear has become their identity. When they've stopped trying to heal and started using pain as an excuse to avoid growth. There's a difference between a man healing and a man hiding. The one who's healing may still be scared, but he's self-aware. He might say, I'm struggling, but I'm working on it. You can feel that his intentions are aligned with progress, not stagnation. He communicates, even when it's uncomfortable. He may not have all the answers, but he's willing to learn. That's a man who's trying to rise beyond his past. The one who's hiding does something different. He wears fear like armor and uses it to justify distance. He might tell you, "I just can't do relationships," yet still expect your loyalty. He'll disappear, and when you ask why, he'll tell you you're asking for too much. He'll romanticize solitude because it protects him from accountability. That's not healing. That's hiding behind pain to avoid responsibility. Healing means movement. Hiding means staying comfortable in avoidance. And love cannot grow where avoidance rules. Because a relationship can survive fear, but it cannot survive absence of effort. You can't build something lasting with someone who's committed to their comfort more than their connection. You may care for him deeply. You may want to believe that love can fix everything, but love by itself is not medicine for unhealed fear. Love can open the door, but the other person has to walk through it. You can't make someone choose courage. You can't make someone trust again. You can't force a man to be ready for love if he's still chasing safety. That's why self-awareness becomes your greatest ally in love. Because when you understand that healing and hiding look similar in the beginning, you stop being blinded by potential. You start watching for patterns. You start asking deeper questions. Does his fear make him avoid responsibility? Or does it make him want to grow? Does he communicate his struggle? Or does he shut down completely? Does he let you in when it's hard? Or does he push you out every time? Those answers reveal everything. The truth is, healing men are rare because healing requires courage. It means revisiting memories that hurt, owning mistakes, and learning to trust again. It's not easy to face your own patterns. It's painful, uncomfortable, humbling. But the man who does it earns peace. He stops projecting old pain onto new love. He stops running from every woman who triggers an old wound. He starts to understand that the love he wants will demand vulnerability, not perfection. But the man who hides doesn't want that level of honesty. He wants comfort, not growth. He wants the illusion of control, not the risk of connection. He wants companionship without accountability. And the longer you try to love someone who's hiding, the more invisible you become in the relationship. You start walking on eggshells, trying not to trigger his walls. You start lowering your needs, convincing yourself that patience is the answer. You tell yourself he just needs time, but time doesn't heal what's never confronted. That's why knowing when to walk away isn't about giving up on love. It's about giving up on one-sided healing. You cannot build a safe love with someone who hasn't made peace with their own pain. Because love without healing becomes survival. You start adapting to their wounds instead of growing together. And yet, walking away doesn't have to come from anger. It can come from clarity, from the deep understanding that you deserve someone who's willing to meet you halfway. Someone who's not perfect, but present. Someone who doesn't just say, "I'm scared," but adds, "and I'm still going to try." That's love with integrity. Because love, at its core, isn't about finding someone flawless. It's about finding someone fearless enough to confront what keeps them guarded. A healed man is not one who never gets scared. He's one who refuses to let fear make his decisions. That kind of man communicates. He takes accountability. He admits when he's wrong. He's not afraid to be transparent about his struggles. You can feel his growth in how he treats you. Consistently, even when it's hard. And if you've ever met a man like that, you know the difference immediately. His presence feels stable. His silence doesn't breed anxiety. His effort feels grounded. That's not because he's perfect. It's because he's done the inner work that allows love to be safe again. This brings us to something most people overlook. Healing requires courage, not distance. Because distance doesn't heal you. It just pauses you. You can hide from love for months, years even, and still feel the same pain when you try again. Time doesn't fix what avoidance keeps alive. Healing isn't measured in how long you've been single. It's measured in how much you've grown in that time. Courage is the moment you decide to love again, not recklessly, but consciously. Courage is choosing vulnerability even when it scares you. It's saying, yes, I've been hurt, but I'm willing to believe again. That kind of bravery changes everything. Because the walls that once protected you start to become prisons, and the only way out is through trust. Not blind trust in others, but trust in yourself. Trust that you can survive if love doesn't work out. Trust that you're wiser now, that you won't ignore red flags, that you know how to communicate. Healing through courage is not about pretending you're fine. It's about admitting that fear still exists, but choosing not to let it dictate your actions. It's standing at the edge of vulnerability and deciding to step forward anyway. Because every time you choose to open your heart, even a little, you reclaim power from the pain that once silenced you. Courage doesn't always look bold. Sometimes it looks quiet. It looks like sending that message even when you're scared. It looks like saying, I miss you, when your ego wants to stay silent. It looks like being honest about what you need instead of pretending you don't care. It looks like letting someone love you without assuming they'll leave. That's how love begins to heal. Not through grand gestures, but through small acts of bravery repeated daily. When two people decide to face fear instead of feeding it, something shifts. Communication becomes softer. Honesty becomes easier. You stop trying to win and start trying to understand. You stop testing each other and start trusting each other. Love becomes a collaboration instead of a competition. It's no longer about who's more guarded or who's more invested. It's about partnership. Two people who see each other's wounds and choose to grow around them instead of through them. Because real love doesn't demand perfection, it demands presence. It asks you to show up with all your flaws, insecurities, and uncertainties and still choose connection over control. The man who learns this understands that courage isn't about never being hurt. It's about not letting pain define his capacity for love. He stops letting old heartbreaks predict his future. He stops comparing new relationships to past ones. He begins to realize that not every person will break him the way the last one did. And as he lets go of that fear, love starts to feel lighter again. Healing through courage means realizing that the pain you felt doesn't make you unworthy of love. It makes you capable of deeper love. The man who has been through heartbreak and still chooses to love again is not naive. He's evolved. Because it takes immense strength to rebuild your heart and offer it to someone new, knowing it could be broken again. That's not weakness. That's growth. When both people in a relationship embody that kind of courage, something powerful happens. Fear no longer dominates the connection. The energy shifts from anxiety to assurance, from overthinking to understanding, from avoidance to acceptance. Both people know that pain might visit, but love will not crumble because of it. Love built on courage becomes emotionally safe, not because it's flawless, but because it's honest. Both people admit their fears instead of hiding them. They communicate through discomfort instead of shutting down. They apologize without ego and listen without defensiveness. That's what it means to love from a healed place. And the truth is, no one ever becomes fully fearless. Fear will always exist. It's part of being human. But when courage leads, fear becomes a teacher instead of a ruler. It reminds you to appreciate love more deeply, to communicate more clearly, to value emotional safety more intentionally. Healing doesn't mean you'll never be hurt again. It means you'll never lose yourself again when it happens. It means your heart will bend without breaking, because it's rooted in self-worth. It means you can love without needing to be perfect, because you finally understand that love isn't about eliminating risk. It's about embracing it with wisdom. That's the moment when the walls fall, when connection feels natural again. When you look at someone and realize They're not your past. They're your chance to create something new. And that's what love was meant to be all along, not a guarantee, but a choice made every day in the presence of fear, met with courage, patience, and truth.